Now, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has rejected a controversial media bill which would have forced tough regulations upon journalists and imposed fines on media houses that break the rules. Observers say it is a step forward in the often strained relationship between the media and many governments in Africa. Kenya's Deputy Prime Minister William Ruto was among several leaders who attended a recent media forum in Ethiopia and assured journalists of his opposition to that bill. And he and other leaders called for better engagement and partnership with Africa's media.
These are panelists.
Some of Africa's most influential leaders held an audience with media players at the recent African Media Leaders Forum in Ethiopia and told them that they were committed to press freedom and freedom of expression in Africa. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto, in the media recently due to his indictment by the International Criminal Court, said governments and media need not be adversaries.
We may serve in different arms of government and society, but we all share a common goal to make our continent a better home for all of us.
The speakers urged African media to help change what they called the negative and distorted narrative on Africa as depicted by mainstream global media and persists today. The United Nations' Carlos Lopez.
Despite almost 100% internet penetration in Europe and America, it is still not unusual for Africa to be perceived only as a place of famine, anger and wars.
The African Union's Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma said media reports tend to focus on corruption and poor governance at the expense of positive developments like improvements in infrastructure.
We talk about financing gap, which is fine. Yes, there is a financing gap. But what we don't say is that 60% comes from our own governments, from our own treasuries. The narrative out there is like we're sitting, waiting for people to come and rescue us.
Zuma chided African journalists for their role in Africa's negative depiction.
I've seen lots of reports that come from ourselves that tell a horrible story about us.
The negative coverage has hurt Africa's development, said African Development Bank President Donald Kaberuka. However, he says things are changing, even in Western media.
You blame the European press. Actually, I want to praise some of them, including the most famous one, which condemned us in 2000, is a hopeless continent. By 2004, they are saying a continent on the rise, so they can also change their mind. But I think what Dr. Zuma says, we ourselves, we must be at the forefront, explaining things we are doing to contain, to mitigate for risks on our continent.
To achieve this, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn offered this challenge to Africa's media leaders.
Africa, therefore, should consider building its own continental media network run by independent professionals. Ethiopia will support such a project as we believe that the African continent has to end the legacy of dependency, including in the area of today's most vital services, that is information.
The call for positive coverage from Africa's media sparked this question from a journalist present.
Should we be keeping quiet about those leaders who mistreat their nationals, who disregard their basic rights?
The answer's encouraging. Demeke Mekonnen is Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister.
We are entering to a new chapter. The role of the leaders, government, officials, institutes, primarily should be accountable to the public.
For those of you who are in media, the best way to support any government is to criticize when it goes wrong.
Just quickly want to make a correction that William Ruto is Kenya's Deputy President, not Prime Minister, as I said earlier. Well, joining us now in studio is Amadou Maktar Bah, Chief Executive of the Africa Media Initiative, which organizes the African Media Leaders Forum. And I have to say thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Bah, on Thanksgiving Day here in America.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, let's talk about what happened in Kenya today. Obviously very monumental for media people like yourselves. What does this mean? That for one, the MPs in Kenya are trying to pass this legislation and that the president struck it down?
Well, it means that there's democracy at work. First and foremost, we all have been really, really, really surprised, but also, quite frankly, disappointed by the fact that this new government, headed by President Kenyatta, was trying to actually repeal gains, democratic gains, because in the Kenyan constitution you have freedom of the press, which is enshrined in it.
Right.
So, everybody was taken aback and quite frankly surprised. And there have been engagement with President Kenyatta since. And one of the things President Kenyatta has made clear all along was he was going to review it and make sure there is no sliding back in the gains which happened before him. And I think this is a very, very welcome development.
And of course, also the Deputy President, William Ruto,
Sure.
made mention to that when he was at the AMLF forum.
Sure.
Let's talk about that. In its 6th year now, specifically this leaders roundtable, the heads of state roundtable, and what they proposed. Is that something that took you by surprise? Is this something that you want to see happen? What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things which were discussed and surprised. I'm not sure if you are, which point exactly?
Specifically about the call for Africa to own its own media, change the narrative, start owning. Is that something that you see as the solution?
Well, there have been over the years discussion about, this is really not new. The words has changed. You remember in the 70s there was this New World Information Communication Order. Africa owning its narrative is really not different from philosophically what it meant back then. What today this really means, coming from these leaders, is to say, look, at the end of the day, let's define ourselves as Africans what we want to say. And let's not just be sitting and blaming the Western media, because as President Kaberuka said, some of the Western media say it like it is. When the continent was not, on the right track, they called it a hopeless continent. When the same continent evolved in the right direction, they called it something else, much more hopeful. So I think, this is, the important thing here is to see what can be done by those very same leaders who are talking about Africa owning its narrative, to create the conditions, the ecosystem for media to develop, and for media professionals to be able to shape, define the narrative. That's really what the key is.
Very briefly, before you go, you had the AMI and the board, a lot of criticism for holding this event in Ethiopia. Did you achieve what you wanted? Well,
we did achieve what we wanted. Look, let me just put this in context, okay? When we decided to go to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, we knew it wouldn't be easy. Many organizations criticize the move. But we believe in engagement. We believe in discussion because we truly believe that once you start talking, then progress comes in. Look, we've been able to have high-level discussions from the Prime Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Information on press freedom, freedom of expression in the country. Not only that, we've been able to go visit the prisons in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. And they always refuse this, including to a U.S. congressional delegation.
But yet they allowed you.
Well, they allowed us to go do it. So this is just the beginning.
Now, and unfortunately, I have to stop you there. But thank you so much. Glad that you could come and give us that insight. Amadou Ba, Chief Executive Officer of the Media Initiative, which organizes the African Media Leaders Forum.